Southern Hills. And today we're all very happy that Jesse John is here. And well, he's a junior at Harvard, and he's in the Department of Computer Sciences. And he's come here to share his life story with us.
Yeah, thank you. Today I'll talk in English because it's mainly for the students. So I split what I'm saying today up into a few parts. I'll go through them one by one, but I'll leave a lot of time at the end for questions. And if you have any particular questions or general things, I can talk about whatever I think about or how I look at things. So to start off, I'll talk about my sort of background, how I grew up, and what I'm doing now. So I grew up here in Boulder. I went to elementary school in High Peaks, if anyone went there. And I started studying math and stuff like that around elementary school, so 3rd grade. We had a sort of program there called Math Olympiad. I started there, and then throughout there, after that, I did a lot of sort of academic work. I got a lot more into academics and math. So if you have any questions about math contests or stuff like that, I did a lot of that in high school, so you can ask me questions, but I won't talk about that here. And now, right now, after elementary school, I went to Southern Hills, or I went to Summit for a year actually. Then I went to Southern Hills for the rest of middle school. And then I came to Fairview for high school, and I took a lot of classes here at Fairview. And yeah, I had a really good experience here at Fairview. And now after Fairview, I've done 2 years at Harvard. I studied computer science. And now is my summer after my sophomore year, and I'm going to go back and take my junior year in about a few days. So I guess to start out, in elementary school when I was really little, I spent a lot of time playing piano, which I'm sure a lot of you guys did. But after that, I sort of phased out and spent more time doing math. I think the piano was a good experience because even though you might think objectively, like, now you don't really play piano. Like now, very few of my friends play piano seriously. And later on in your career or in your life, you're not going to do that much centered around piano. So what's the use of playing piano so much when you're little? I think that one thing is it teaches you how to learn something, and I think that's really important. So when you're starting out piano, you don't know anything. You don't know how to play, you don't know how to read music, but after you start learning, you can figure out, oh, how do I improve the fastest? And how do I find patterns in what I'm doing and stuff like that? And how do I put in time every day to get better? So I think that part's really important. And that was a really good foundation. So I definitely think at an early age, it's really important to do something like that. But later on, maybe it's useful to phase out into something that you enjoy more or is more productive to your future. So after that, elementary school, High Peaks, did a lot of studying, I guess. And then middle school, did a lot more studying. And then high school, did more studying as well. And now I'm in college, and I do more studying. So yeah, it's like you have to get used to it, and you have to figure out how to keep doing it more and how to learn to enjoy it. So that's my sort of background. Right now at Harvard, I'm studying computer science, like Peter said. I do a lot of math classes too, and I have a lot of experience in internships as well, so if you guys have questions like that, I know it's a long way off for a lot of you guys, but I have internship experience in tech, so Silicon Valley, and also finance, like trading on Wall Street. Okay, my second section, I was going to talk about what sort of things I really liked about my childhood and what really helped. So first thing is with parents. I think 2 things here. Parents, when kids are little, I think everyone always says, there's so much advice everywhere, like, everyone should do what they love and do what you're passionate about. But I think, to be honest, most kids, when they're little, don't have any passions because they haven't had time to develop them. So it's not really productive to let kids follow their passions because they don't know what their passions are. And passions, I think, aren't really intrinsic. Like you're not born with some sort of passion for something. You probably develop it at a young age, or you find oh, you're probably good at something, or after you do something for for a while, you like get in the flow, or maybe a lot of your friends do it. So that's how passionate they're about. So I think early on, it's pretty useful for parents to help. So you can help your children figure out what they want to do and provide them with resources. So if they want to study something, you can help them find materials. If they want to play a sport, you can like find classes for them or something. And you can push them a bit because I think most kids, it's very rare to have a kid who's like, after you tell them to do something, they'll just keep doing it. Most kids just like to play and relax. So at that point, it's pretty useful. But I think as time goes on, maybe it's still useful, but it becomes less useful because as kids get older, if you provide them with more advice and more structure, maybe it's better for them. They can learn better or get better grades or whatever. But then after a certain point, I think their potential is capped. And their potential is capped by how well the parent can teach. So if you have a really talented student and all you're doing is telling them what to do and pushing them, then they're only going to go as high as like your ability to push them, which is probably not very high. So if you actually want them to achieve the highest results, I think as they get older, after you have a sort of foundation, give them a lot more freedom. Because I think maybe even if you push all the way for a student, their expected value or their average is maybe higher than if you just gave them freedom. But if you gave them freedom, then their upper bound is a lot higher. So I think after they get to high school or maybe later in middle school, give them more freedom. And if they have more freedom, maybe at the beginning they'll like to play a lot and whatever, but after a while, playing will get tiresome and they'll focus more on things that are more fulfilling for their life. So that's the parents part. The second part about parents I think was very useful for me is whenever I did things, parents maybe would set a goal like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if this happened? And then maybe after a lot of work like that actually would happen. But then my parents wouldn't be super like, oh, good job, like, you did a great job, like, this is awesome, you're set for life. They're just like, oh, like, that's great, but there's still so much more. So I think it's very important, especially if you have a talented child or a child that's doing well in something, to not let them get complacent. Because a lot of Asian households, especially with parents who give a lot of help younger, they do a lot better at younger ages, but then after a while, because they're better than their classmates, it's very easy to get complacent, or like parents are like, good job, or whatever, and then they stop being hungry or whatever for more things. So I think those are the two main things that help me from a parent's perspective. Another thing is, I think Colorado, so yeah, after parents, I think I'll talk about the environment that helped me when I was little. I think Colorado is a really good environment to grow up and do whatever you want because students here are generally very well-rounded, I guess. They like to do a lot of things. A lot of students at schools like to play sports outside or whatever. So there's a lot of avenues for you to do what you want. The other thing is that the academic environment isn't that competitive. So on one hand, it's not really a good thing because then your students and your friends aren't pushing you as much. But compared to other places like California or New York, your peer group isn't as cutthroat or intense. So I think that's actually a good thing because you can focus more on yourself and you have more freedom to find your own path, I guess. So I think those are really good things. So I think you should all appreciate being in Colorado because it's a great place and a great environment. And when you get to college, you'll realize like how great Colorado is and how lacking certain other places are. Okay, so after those things, okay, the last part or the next step I'm going to talk about is how to stay motivated and how you keep doing something for a long time. So from a parent's point of view, I think it's really important when children or students are younger, or even in middle school or early high school, to send them to things outside of Colorado or to national camps or programs or stuff like that. Because even though, like I said, Colorado is a great place to grow up, it's also very like a bubble. And when you grow up here, you only hear about news or things that other Colorado students do, and you only like sort of compete with Colorado students, and you only get to talk to Colorado students. And that's the bad part of Colorado not being that competitive, because then you won't be able to hear about a lot of good opportunities that are happening early on, and you might get a really false sense of how good students across the nation are. And I think that's really important, because when I was at Fairview High School, people did a lot of contests all the time, like debate or whatever, but it was all centered around like statewide things. And when you go to a national level, it's so much more different because of all the super talented people like in California, Texas, or New York, whatever. And if you don't do that early, then you don't have a good perspective of what you need to do. And then when you get to college, it's going to be a huge shock. Like, oh, in Colorado, like, I was good, but now in college, everyone else is good, so my life is worse. So I think that's not good. So early on, you should get a good perspective of how students are doing across the nation. And I think that's really important, and it allows students to not get complacent as well. Okay, the next part I'm going to talk about is things outside academics. So I'm sure a lot of you guys are very focused on academics. I was very focused on academics. And I also, it's just something I noticed is that a lot of smart kids, especially from Asian households for some reasons, don't really like to be super outgoing or talk to a lot of people or express themselves. And I'm definitely not, I don't think I'm a very extroverted person. Like, I don't like to talk a lot, and like in social gatherings, I usually let my friends talk or whatever. And I think that's fine. I think if your child does not like to talk that much, you shouldn't push them to talk too much. But I also think society and also school really rewards extroversion. So if a child is really talkative and really likes to talk, is really sociable, regardless of how capable they are, society will reward them because people just naturally think that if you talk a lot, you're smarter, or if you talk a lot, you know what you're doing and you have a lot of confidence. And that's true. Like, if you talk a lot, you probably have more confidence. So I think talking is really good to the extent that it builds your confidence, and you can probably crystallize your thoughts a bit more clear. But I also think it's not that good if your child does not want to talk, you don't want to change them into someone who talks all the time. And from my personal experience, in middle school, I did not like to talk at all. In class, I would always just sit there and not raise my hand. And I just noticed that it wasn't turning out so well, because it takes more effort to get interactions with the teacher, because they don't really know who you are. They probably know your name, but you never talk in class, so they don't have a strong impression of you. So as soon as I came to that realization, I would just raise my hand for random things, and I would just say whatever's on my mind. And the thing you realize is that you do not have to say anything insightful. No one cares what you say. You just say something, and then the teacher will probably acknowledge it, "Oh, good job, Jesse," things like that. And you can start like that, but then after a while, you start developing more insights, and you can contribute to class conversations. So I think that's a good way. So the easiest way, the easiest level is just in class. You can talk. And I think the more intimidating part is not actually talking to the teacher, it's talking in front of all your friends or your classmates. So once you get over that, it's very easy. And also throughout high school and middle school, I was very nervous when I talked to teachers one-on-one. I'm not really sure why. I don't know if that happens to you guys, but so these things they just happen, and there's nothing you can change or to stop that. You're just you're either nervous or you're not nervous. And once you realize that, though, you can do things to help yourself. So if you realize, for example, every time I go talk to a teacher, I get nervous, then you should consciously force yourself to try to overcome that problem. So set more meetings with teachers, and you can talk with them. And they're actually really friendly. And once you get older, you kind of realize the perspective from a teacher. If you ever teach something yourself, it's actually very good to have students talk to you, because it means that they care about the class and they're not just showing up to sit there because their like parents forced them to be there or something like that. So I think that's really important, the social aspect. And what I mean by society really rewarding extroversion and things like that is once you graduate or go anywhere to work, anyone who has a better skill set of expressing themselves is way more effective at whatever they do. So if you want to do technology or something, all the engineers are all very talented. Like if you go work at Google, everyone's really talented, but all of the people who go to leadership positions are people who aren't necessarily that talkative, but if they have an idea, they can really easily tell it to other people. And that's really important because if you're working, especially in a more technical field, ideas can be pretty complex. And even if you're really smart and you can think of a lot of things, but you can't tell anyone about it, then it's really useless. So no one knows that you came up with this idea and no one's going to actually use it. So you have to be able to practice and be confident enough to tell other people about your ideas. And then that's how like people become like managers or VPs or whatever. So I think that's really important. So and you have to start early. And I think with everything you have to start early. And that's I think where parents are more important. So when children are in elementary school, all the people I know, in college you'll meet a lot of talented people. All the people I know who are really good at something and like top in the nation at something, all started in elementary school. So that doesn't mean that if you didn't start in elementary school, you're not going to be really good. But because you start early, there must be something in your development that if you start early, you develop the skill and you become really good at it. So I think everything you want to do, you shouldn't push to later on. You should start as soon as possible, even if at the beginning it's not really that intense and you're just trying. Okay, so that was that section, I guess. I don't know if I wanted to talk about anything else. Yeah, okay, so that social part is that. And then the other thing is, if you're also pretty focused on studying, you should also develop some other things that you like doing, because no one can do studying all the time. And even if you're good or whatever, at some points you're going to want to take a break or whatever. And when you take a break, you shouldn't spend your time like playing video games or something, or at least that's what my view is, because even though it will take your mind off your work, it's not really like giving you anything you can use later on, and you'll probably regret it eventually, because when you're a child, like those years, even now in college, like these years are the most important for developing skills that will be useful later on. So instead, if you really like playing a sport or something, you can pursue that, or another thing, another activity, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But things to start early. And another thing I noticed is, especially when people get to high school first, or get to college first, the most natural reaction is to want to do a lot of things at once, because maybe you hear about it from other people, or you see it on TV, and like, oh, I want to do debate, I'm going to be really good at debate, or I'm going to want to do like soccer or whatever. And my view is that it's actually better to pick a small set of things that you really care about and focus all your life around that, and focus on doing your best in those things, instead of doing like a very wide set of things and being mediocre at everything. Because no one has enough talent or time to be really good at too many things, because that's impossible. So I think it's fine to like have a really wide distribution of things that you like or are able to do, but the skill levels that are like high should only be focused on a few. So yeah, just pick whatever those are and focus on that. And I think that'll also make your life a lot happier, because when you're stressed or whatever, it's probably because you have a lot of things in your life going on and you're caring about a lot of things. But if you only care about a few things and everything else is like whatever, then if bad things happen in those things or whatever, you can just ignore it and just still be happy with what you have and the things that you really care about. Okay, yeah, so basically like pursue your other talents. That's the takeaway. Okay, after that, let's see. I also wanted to talk about college because I think that's a request I got. So first of all, applying to college, I think it's most people find it to be pretty stressful. It doesn't have to be that stressful if you're more organized, I think. So with the college application process, first of all, like everything else, it's better to start earlier. So if you have in mind some schools you want to apply to, just start maybe like as soon as you start high school. I think plan out like sort of what you want your main dimensions to be and where you want to apply and do some research. And then when you get to school, I think this is the most important thing to staying happy ever, or just in general. And probably the most important thought you can take away from this talk is when you get to college, or even in high school, the most important thing for people is to have a strong sense of purpose. And that is where happiness comes from, I think. So if you have a strong sense of purpose, that will be your happiness. But the problem is a lot of people have like a sort of false purpose that isn't really the purpose, but they think is their purpose, that they assign themselves. So in high school, maybe a lot of people's purpose is getting into college. But then when you get to college, all of a sudden your like purpose that you've had for 4 years is gone. And now you're kind of lost and like you're not sure what you want to do. So you just take a bunch of like random classes, and then all of a sudden you're behind other students who know what they want to do and have had a purpose and have worked hard those years as well. So I think what you want to do is, in high school, maybe college is pretty important, but it's only like one step in your purpose. And you should think about what you want to do, I guess, like not specific subject, because a lot of people don't know what specific subject, but like what you want to, like what makes you happy and stuff like that. And when you have a strong sense of purpose, then you can really work harder and be happier. And when you get to college, the same thing. A lot of people spend so many hours on homework and things like that, and they're still pretty unhappy or stressed. And I think if you have some sort of like light at the end of the tunnel or whatever that you can focus on, it'll make you a lot happier. Okay, so that's that part. And then in terms of applying to college, it's pretty direct process. Like the applications, like you already know what's going to be on the application, so you can just get all those items beforehand and make sure everything's in order. And in terms of, you have to write an essay and stuff like that. So a lot of people have struggles writing an essay, and not because they're bad writers, but because they don't know what to write about. And I think a good way to do that is the same sort of strategy that you used before to figure out what you want to do in high school and gear that towards your app, is to pick out your like top traits that you want colleges to know about you, and also pick out the top experiences you've done in high school, such as like the clubs or like a program you did or a project you did, and like match them up to like see which one corresponds to which one, and then for each matching you write an essay about it. And then after that you'll have like lots of essays, and you'll be all set. So that's college. Okay, and then after you get to college and later on, I think most important things are, like I just said, having purpose. But also, your friends are really important. So I think if you're trying to decide where you want to apply to, the most important thing is to look at the peer group there. So if you have friends that are there already, or you have other friends that you know are going to go there, or you visited and you talked to some students, you're like, oh, like this person really like me, or I can see myself going here. That's the most important, because most schools probably have the similar sort of education system and education quality, and no matter what, most of the work you're doing on your own anyway, so you're like doing homework and stuff. But your friends will be the most important, and you can also learn the most from your friends and the fastest, because if you think about it, when you learn, you can either learn through like reading things that, like textbooks or whatever, and that stuff is not very condensed, and it's very like sparse, and you have to read everything and be able to summarize it in your mind and figure out what's important. But if you have a friend teach you, they already know what's important, and they already have the knowledge, so it's like really fast, they just tell you what to do, and that's, and you're done. I think that's the biggest difference between working in industry and going to school, is going to school, your learning process is you read things and you study and you take tests, and you have to do all the figuring out on your own, like what's important, how do I like match this formula to my previous knowledge of this topic, things like that. But in industry, things move a lot faster, and if you're trying to learn something, you just call someone, they'll explain it to you, and then you're done. So I think that's another big thing. So yeah, make sure you have good friends. And yeah, so I'm halfway through. That's basically all I had to talk about, and now I can answer any questions you have. Yes?
Couple of questions. Why do you believe Summit for Sun Hills is just for young kids who can't decide which school to go to?
Oh,
and,
yes. Okay.
And the second question is, I know you're very good in math, and so at a young age, what made you develop your passion or love for math? Any advice for young kids who want to be good at math?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, those are really good questions. The first one's pretty easy. Summit versus Southern Hills, it's probably the two biggest middle schools in Boulder. Summit has a really nice culture, I think. So there's like a lot of smart kids that go there. It's a charter school, so people think they have more flexibility in like getting ahead or becoming better at what they do. Southern Hills is a bit different. It's a public school, and there's just more students. And maybe on average, the level of academicness they have is not that high. I switched from Summit to Southern Hills so I could take classes at Fairview. So in 7th grade, I took math here, and in 8th grade, I took a lot of classes here. So that just made it easy. I could just walk back and forth. That was the main reason. I don't think there's much difference for middle school. I think if you're not going to do that, then maybe Summit's probably better. But it depends on the student. The second question, how did I get into it? So in elementary school, I didn't really do that much math or stuff like that until 3rd grade. At High Peaks, there was a program called Math Olympiad. I don't know if any of you guys did it, but I just signed up for it with some other people, and I did quite well. So after that, to answer your question, how do you find your interest in stuff like that? I honestly don't think kids have passions or intrinsic love for things. Because if you don't know what it is, how can you love it? So I don't think when I was in elementary school I loved to do it or anything. But after a while, if you find out like you do a lot of programs and stuff and you like really enjoy doing it, or you find that like it's natural for you, then you grow to love it. So I mean, when you're born, you can't really decide like what's natural for you, I guess. So maybe some people can do math more easily than other people. But you just have to try it at a young age. So if you try it and your child is like really good at it, then just push them along more, I think. So yeah, first thing is just trying it. And then afterwards, the other thing is you can put some external factors to accelerate the process. So one thing is competition, for example. Competition is a great motivator for kids, I think, or people in general. So if you go to a competition, no one wants to lose, so you're going to put in more time to study for it and things like that. And the other thing is give them friends who also like to do it. So if there are like other kids in your area that like to do math and you want kids to do math, like make them friends with each other, things like that. I don't know. But yeah, early on, I don't think there's such thing as love for math at that young of age. But later on, you just, as you put so much time into it, you start to realize how like nice it is and how how nice it is. Yeah.
Did you do sports in high school?
No, so I didn't. I played a lot of basketball, but like I wasn't like super intense with sports. So like I played a lot of basketball, but like I don't think you have to like for everyone there isn't like a certain mold of level that you have to go to like do something. So if you like to do something, just push yourself to get better at it, and as long as you're trying your hardest, like honestly, I think that's all. So I mean, are you thinking about doing?
Well, no, I already do sports.
Okay.
I was just asking, how did that affect your applying to colleges at all?
Oh, so do you think it would help or?
Yeah, it would help or it would.
Oh, yeah, of course. So I think colleges now more and more are evaluating sports or just well-roundedness, and they care less about your test scores and things like that. So sports important, and yeah, but I mean, I don't think you have to be at the level to play like college sports. So like, if you're at that level, then it'll help you a lot because then you'll just get recruited for that sport, and you don't even have to do that well in your classes. But yeah, it's a good sort of thing to do to create more dimensionality. Yeah.
So at Fairview, did you do the AP and or IB courses? And if you did, like, what was your general feeling about it? And like, did you do the diploma? And was it worth it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for anyone who doesn't know, at Fairview, Fairview actually is quite good for schools in Colorado to have all these good classes. So there's something called AP, and AP is just a test. So even if you don't take the class, you can go take the test. And the test is sort of like a check mark, and you apply to colleges that like you're good at, or like you have a decent amount of knowledge in some topic. The other thing is IB. IB is pretty different from AP. IB isn't just some test, it's like a whole program you have to go through at Fairview, and you start in like at the end of sophomore year or something, and you have to take a bunch of classes and go through all the requirements. I did both, so I did the IB diploma, and then I also took a lot of AP tests. I think AP tests are good because they're like a way for you to actually measure if you're like if you know something about a topic. So you can study, and then at the end you take the test, and if you do well, then you're like, okay, I'm done with that. So AP tests are good. IB, I think is very useless because you go through it, and in college, like no one cares about it. Like no college in the U.S. cares about IB really. But beside the fact that if it's on your application, they'll know that you put in a lot of time and you know how to study. So if you think you have the capability to do IB and it's available, if you go to Fairview, then I actually do think you should do it. The main important thing is not because it will be on your application, but because of the peers you'll have at Fairview. Because all the students who are somewhat into studying do IB at Fairview. So if you don't do IB, you're not going to be part of that community, I think. So that's really important. And being part of that community is really important because, like I said, my whole spiel about your friends. So that's really important. So yeah, I definitely think IB was worth it, but I don't think it's useful. Yes?
When did you realize that, like, if your parents pushed you too much,
Oh, yes. Yeah, so for math, for example, my parents are actually quite smart, and my mom's like very good at math, but well, obviously, like as a kid, you want to be better at them, right? So if they're pushing you all the time, and especially if they're the ones teaching you, then you're never going to be better than them. So you have to have some sort of sense of pushing yourself to be better than them, or like get to a higher level. And I think there's no way to realize it while you're doing it. You can only realize it afterwards, like when you start going to college, and you can think back, like, oh, what really helped you. And I think in high school, my parents gave me a lot of freedom and things like that. So I think it was really helpful because, for example, on weekends when you wake up, you either decide like, am I going to relax today and watch Netflix or like hang out with friends, or am I going to go do math? And it probably isn't going to do math unless your parents have sort of laid off and like let you do what you want, and you can choose Netflix if you want to. So if you have a student and you have a choice, then eventually you're going to start doing the thing that is more fulfilling to you. But if your parents are always like cutting off the Netflix option, then you don't know that like what watching Netflix for a whole weekend feels like. So you're always going to want to watch Netflix for a whole weekend. But once you have the choice and you watch it for a whole weekend, you're going to be like, wow, that was the worst weekend of my life. I didn't do anything. And now I just feel a lot dumber. So then, because you have more freedom, you get to choose the more productive thing. Yes?
So you only mentioned a little about video games.
Uh-huh.
So what's your opinion about technology or students playing video games?
I didn't really play video games when I was in high school. I think it helped because if you think about it, if you play video games for like 1 to 2 hours a day across like a whole year, that's like so many hours. Yeah, it's a lot of hours. So if you took all the hours and just like did something else, even not like full force, you would get very good at the other thing. So the reason I don't think video games is that productive is because you can get really good at video games, but it doesn't really help you, I think, besides like, you can like click faster or whatever. So, but I actually know a lot of my very talented friends who play a lot of video games at school, but I think it's because they just have so much talent that they can substitute some of that time with their talent, but then that's just wasteful. And like, why would you do that? Because if they're already really high and they didn't play video games, they could be like even higher. So I just don't think it's that productive. But yeah, I mean, it's like, I guess there's something to be said about you can play with your friends, so like it's like a good bonding experience. But yes, yeah, I think that's the other thing. So if you restrict your kids too much from playing video games, they're always going to want to play video games. So, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to find a balance. So yeah, I don't know if there's a correct answer to that, but I think when you get to college, very few people play video games. Like even people who played a lot of video games in high school or middle school, when they get to college, they just stop. Maybe one is because it just seems more mature not to play, but also you don't have time, you have to do other things. So might as well just stop earlier because you're going to stop anyways. Yes?
Can you please talk about the top 3 influences that have in high school that have helped you land at Harvard? For example, GPA, AP, IB courses, or club competitions, or volunteer leaderships?
Yes. Okay.
Just top 3.
Good question. So I think things like GPA, GPA, your like test scores and things like that. They're like things that have to be good if you want to get to like a certain level. So there's just like given things like in your foundation that you have to have.